numerous occasions and talk about the way this vote took place in the beginning. I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that this had to have a start somewhere, and this start was when Secretary Paulson, and I have to say this as a Republican, this is a Republican administration, he was our Secretary of Treasury, came out with this plan and how to save the world, and said that we've got to have $700 billion. It's got to be spent to buy damaged assets. And even at that time, it didn't make any sense, because if you read the document, it didn't say anything as to what was going to happen to this money. It just completely, it was a blank check. Never in the history of Oklahoma have we voted to give anyone, elected or in this case, unelected bureaucrat, $700 billion to do with whatever he or she wants to do with it. It's just, it's mind-boggling that that could have happened, but it did happen. The other thing that makes history out of this is the largest single vote on an authorization in the history of this country. I mean, this amount is so big. I've tried to explain to people what this really means. $700 billion, if you take all of the families in America that file tax returns and do your math, that's $5,000 a family. That's what we're talking about. So anyway, I opposed it originally and said that we're going to regret that we did this unprecedented thing. I hate to say it, even though I want to encourage as many people to vote for this resolution, it doesn't make that much difference, because if it should pass both the House and the Senate, and of course the House will be voting on it later on, then the new president would come in and would veto it, and all he'd need is 34 votes in the case of the Senate to sustain a veto. And obviously those votes are there. So it's going to happen. But I think it's important that as many people get on record recognizing it's not the right thing to do for America, and to do that, this is their last chance. Right after, in October, after this thing passed the House and the Senate, I introduced legislation at that time, then reintroduced it with the new Congress, putting accountability in so that they would have to come to Congress, and I don't care if it's the Bush administration or if it's the Obama administration, come to Congress, tell us what they want to spend money on, let us debate it, let us go through an appropriation process so that we're in the curve. That's what the Constitution says that we're supposed to be able to do. But it didn't happen. And to name it, TARP, Trouble Asset Relief Program. This is no trouble asset relief program. It was represented by Secretary Paulson to be, he said, I'm going to be buying damaged assets, and that's what it's all about. I've renamed it to the SOAP program, SOAP, the Spend on Any program, because that's exactly what we have done. We don't know today, and we're about to pass something, or we're going to end up adopting something, and this resolution is not going to be able to stop it, that is going to change the behavior it's the first time this has happened in the history of this country. We're going to be saying to somebody, you can have this big block of money, you can do anything you want to with it. So, and that has not happened before. I think the historians 30 and 40 years from now will look back and say that the votes that took place in October that allowed one unelected bureaucrat to have $700 billion is going to be probably the most egregious vote in the history of this institution. So I look at this and I see, that this happened. And I recall in October when the majority, 75% of the House and the Senate, voted for this thing. I said at that time that there are going to be others lined up, and as this is structured, you can't stop it. So here came the auto, and how can you blame the auto industry for coming in and wanting to have a bailout? So they got a bailout. Now, for those of you who think that's really bad, I agree it's bad, but that was only 2% of the total $700 billion. So we need to put these things in perspective. This is something that should not have happened. And I think it's going to go down in history to be one of the really dark moments in this institution. And lastly, I would say this. We've talked to a lot of people, a lot of economists. 3 of them were from the Reagan era. And they said we didn't really accomplish anything with the first $350 billion. Our western farmers in Oklahoma, I won't mention which bank it is, but it was a bank that initially got $20 billion. Now they're asking for more so that credit would be loosened up. They came to me way back in October and said they received this money, but the credit has not loosened up at all. So I'm inclined to think that the first $350 billion were pretty much wasted, and now we're going into another $350 billion. And I would encourage any of my colleagues who voted for the initial $700 billion bailout to go ahead and vote for this resolution to stop the second $350 billion. That would be a redeeming feature in their careers, and I would encourage them to do that. I will yield the floor. Let me inquire of the chair. There's no one else ready to speak right now. If I were to continue to speak, would that use up time on this side? Because I don't want to do that.
Yes, it would,
Okay,
Senator.
I suggest the absence of a quorum then.
The clerk will call